Hey guys, we're here again. We're going to be doing more Freecodecamp JavaScript algorithms. Today, the one that we're looking at is Wherefore art thou. So let's check this one out. All right. Make a function that looks through an array of objects, first argument, collection this one, and returns an array of all objects that have the matching name and value pairs, second argument. Each name and value pair of the source object has to be present in the object from the collection if it is to be included in the returned array. For example, if the first argument is this object, let's see how many elements there are in this object array. This one's first, second, third, right here. And the second argument is this last capulet. Then you must return the third object from the array, the first argument, because it contains the same name and its value and was passed on as a second argument. So check out this second argument here. It's a single object with a key of one key of last and value of capulet. So does this have a last key? Yes, it does. Sorry about that. But it's not capulet. So this one is excluded. This one last is null, so he's not included either. This one also has last and its value is capulet. So the return value will be an array of only this object here. Now, if more than one object fulfill this criteria, then we will have an array of those objects. Now, one thing that's a little bit, let me first copy this first to my code editor. All right, one thing that I don't like about the example that they gave here is we only have one key value pair within our second argument. So I'm gonna work with this example first, and then we're gonna later copy and paste another example such as this one that has two key value pairs in the second argument. All right, so let's start by, it does say here only change the code below this line, only change the code above this line. However, I don't care. I'm gonna break the rules and clean up our code like so. And also, nobody uses a var variable in 21st century, so I'm gonna change that to a const. Now let's think about what we have to do. We need to loop through our first collection of objects. So again, as a recap, an object is a key value pair, is a data that has a bunch of key value pairs. We want to loop through that, and we want to filter out the ones that contain the key value pairs contained in the second object. So the way that we would typically do that is a for loop. Now we want to loop through this collection array. You could always use a traditional for loop like so, and then I++. This is not the most cleanest way to do things, as I've explained in my other videos. The better way, in my opinion, is the for of loop. But let's just start with that one first. So let's just do a for of loop. So const, I'll call each element object because they are objects of collection. And now our object variable here will loop through. First time it will be this, second time it will be this, third time it will be this, and so on. Now we want to loop through this collection, and we want to make sure that this object contains all the key value pairs of our second argument. Now, how do we do that? So again, I don't like this example because it only has one argument. So we'll change it later. But let's just see, how can we loop through all the key value pairs of the second argument and make sure that the object that we're looping through, the current iteration, has all those key value pairs. So we need access to all the key value pairs of the second argument. So I'm gonna make an array out of all the keys of the second object. And the way that we do that is a built-in function in JavaScript. Is called object.keys. So I'm going to store that in a variable. We're going to call it keys. Capital O object.keys of the second argument, which is source. So just to show you guys, let's console log what this gives us. So you notice here we get an array of the string last. And that is because it will give us the array, a list of all keys of our object. So let's switch our example over to one that has more than one key value pair. I'm going to grab this one. Like so. And then let's put a console log over this. And now let's see what our keys are. It should be apple and cookie. And yep, we get apple and cookie. Ignore this one. All right, so now that we have an array of all the keys of our source, as we loop through our collection, our first object, we want to make sure that the object, this one, this OBJ, we want to make sure that it has all the key value pairs from the source. So we have to make another loop. We want to loop through all of our keys. Let me erase the console log and make sure that it exists within the object, and also the value of it is the same as the value from the source. So we need to loop through our source now, our keys now. Sorry about that. So for const, I call it key of keys. So in our example, key will be apple and cookie. And we also need a Boolean variable to keep track of whether our current object in question that we're looping over, whether it contains all the key value pairs within the source or not. So I'm going to call this const has all key value pairs. A little bit wordy, but in my opinion, it's better to be wordy and descriptive with their variable names. And now we have a dilemma. Do we initialize this as false or do we initialize this as true? So one thing we could do is we could initialize it as false and loop through all the keys and then do a check. For example, if so our first key, the 0th index, is, for our example, is going to be apple. So how do we check the value of our collection? I mean of our object that we're looping over. So we do object at key must equal our source at key. So in our example, source at key is going to be apple at first, and source of key is going to be the value of it, which is 1. Now our first object is this one. This object's apple key is also 1, so then this will be true. But then what do? Do we set has all key value pairs to true? And if it's true, this is giving me an error because we're gonna change this variable, so we gotta use let. Do we do this? And I would say no, this is not the proper way to do it. Rather, we assume that it's true in the beginning, and if it's not equal to each other, then we set it as false. So inside our for loop, we're never setting this as true. We're only setting it as true when we initialize it. And we're going to assume it's true until we hit a key value pair where it's not equal. Then it will become false. Now we could continue to loop through this keys array, but that's a little bit redundant. That's unnecessary, because the moment it becomes false once, then we know it's false. So we could just break out of this for loop, and the way that we do that is right after this we say break, and that will break out of the for loop. Now we have to check to see what the value of our Boolean has all key value pairs is. So if our object has all key value pairs, if that is true, so we could either do if that is true, or because it is a Boolean itself, we could just leave it like this. If it has all key value pairs, then we want to add it to the array that we're going to return at the end, like so. And if it doesn't, we don't do anything. meaning we're not adding it. So we're skipping over it. Now, let's see what this return gives us. It gives us this, an array of one object, which is the third one. And that one indeed does have apple, that is 1, and cookie, that is 2. The other ones don't have that. So this appears to be working. So let me copy this over. Let's first, I'll erase some of these spaces. Let's copy this over, put it over here, and see if that works here. Yep, it works. Now, as always, let's do some refactoring. So let's see what we can refactor. Just like before, if you guys have seen my other algo videos, we can refactor this for loop to use one of array's methods. So what we can do is, instead of having all of this and then pushing it into our empty array, we can just use an array method. So I'm going to erase this here, console comment this out, and let's do something similar here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say const array that we want to build is going to be built not from a for loop, but from an array.filter method. So we're going to loop through our collection array just like before, just like what we're doing here, except we're going to use the filter method here. And again, the filter method contains a function inside. The parameters of the function, the first one, is always going to be the element that we're looping over. And because I'm going to have more than one line, I'm going to put curly braces here. And when we have more than one line, we must always end it with the return. And the return object is going to be a Boolean value, either true or false. If it's true, it stays in the filter. If it's false, it's filtered out of the array. So we're going to do something similar here. Again, we're going to say let all key value pairs is true. As all key value pairs is true. Do the same thing here. I'll comment that out. And instead of pushing to the array, because of how array.filter works, put a semicolon there. Instead of pushing, if it has all key value pairs, I'm gonna say return true. Meaning if it has all key value pairs, keep it in the array. Else, return false. Let's see if this works. Now, this is not formatted correctly, so let me just do a little bit of formatting here. All right, that looks a little bit better. There we go. All right, let's erase this. And I'm getting an error here. It's because I have not defined an element object. I called it L instead, but we could just replace this with object. I think object is a little bit more appropriate. Let's see if that works. Yep, we get the correct one. It seems to work. Now we could refactor this part further. This is a little bit redundant because we know this variable has all key value pairs is a Boolean. So we could just say return has all key value pairs. What this means is if has all key value pairs is true, keep it in the array. If it's false, filter it out. So this is a little bit cleaner. And we could go one step further. Notice we're declaring this const array. ARR is pretty much this whole thing. And then right after we made array, we're just returning it. So instead of declaring it first and then returning, we could just return the result of this. And that essentially does the same thing, like so. Now, just for fun, we're going to try to refactor this a little bit more. This is something I would not do in real life because what I'm about to do will make this function a little bit less readable. So it's not recommended. I always believe that readability is the most important thing of a function of coding. But just for fun, let's try this. What I'm going to try to do is get rid of this for loop in here, replace it with some other way of doing this. And what I'm gonna use here is I am going to, instead of having this for loop here, I'm gonna erase this later, but just for reference, I wanna keep it here. I am gonna use the reduce method, and what I'm going to do is const has all key value pairs. I'm gonna set the result of our reduce method as this variable here. So essentially, it's gonna be a Boolean. Now, I'm gonna use the reduce method on the keys array, which for our example contains apple and cookie. Where was I? Right here. Now let me explain real quick, and let's comment this out. All right, so let's go over what reduce does. Reduce method is a method of an array. It gets an array and it reduces it to whatever you want it to be. We could reduce it to a number. It could reduce it to a Boolean, like we are doing in my example. You could reduce it to an array. You could reduce it to an object, or whatever you want. Now, the parameters that it has, it takes in a function, just like our filter method here, as the first argument, and as a second argument, you must set an initial value of your reducer function. And let me explain. But before I set the second value, we gotta put a function as the first value here. The second value, this one we're gonna add in later. So the filter method had a mandatory of one parameter, the object that we're looping over. In this one, the first parameter is what's called an accumulator, ACC for short, and then the second parameter is the element or the object that we're looping over. In our case, we're gonna call it keys. Now, what this accumulator is, it is pretty much like a memory variable that it knows what it is. As you progress in the loop, as you progress in the loop of this keys array, it keeps track of what its value was. And we have to initialize this value first. And that is what's going to be put in here as a second argument of our reduce method. Notice how we set our has all key value pairs as true. So we're also going to initialize our accumulator as true here. Now let me just give some space here. And what goes inside the output of the function argument here is what the value of the accumulator is going to be after this iteration. So in our case, we're going to say, let me grab this part here. Let's comment that out again. We're going to say if, not object this time. Yeah, we don't want to do object. No, we do want to do object. If the object, because we're still within this filter method, is not equal to the source set keys, then instead of doing this, we're going to return false. So then we're essentially saying if this is not equal to that, if the key value pairs of the object and the source is not equal, then set our accumulator as false. Otherwise, return the value of the accumulator, meaning don't change the value of the accumulator, just keep it as what it was. But if it's this, then return false. Let's get rid of this now. And we could return, after we did this, has all key value pairs will either be true or false, depending on what the value of the last accumulator was. And then we're just going to return the result of that. And again, we could make this an inline return. So just return this. Like so. Let's see if that works. And it appears to work. So this is already looking kind of nasty. I could do something else. Notice after this collection.filter, inside this function here, we just have one big return. So I could remove this curly braces here and remove the return and just return. Let me put a parenthesis here and a parenthesis here, I believe, and just do this. So if this is essentially, think of this whole big thing as 1,9. So if the output of our arrow node function like this is just 1,9, quote unquote 1,9, we don't need the return keyword. Just remove the curly braces and put it all within a parentheses. Let's see if this works. There we go. We can't do that for this one because 1, this is a function notation, and 2, we still have this const keys equals object.key, so it's not 1,9. So I think this is what we're gonna end with. Let's make sure that Freecodecamp likes this, and it seems to like it. Thank you so much for joining me again in this Freecodecamp algorithm called Wherefore. I'll be releasing a new algo each day, so please stay tuned. Subscribe if you guys haven't already, and I'll see you guys tomorrow.